Good morning, Your Health Nation. It's Ashley. It's Thursday, and it is time for our live training session this week. So, hopefully, you guys are having a good week so far. It's hard to believe January is almost over. I mean, that's just crazy to me. Um, I'm just, yeah, month has gone by quickly. I've gotten a lot done, and I've got a lot more I want to get done. So, I've got obviously about 4 days to get all this stuff done in. So I've got a lot of goals I want to get done, but it's time for our weekly live training session. So I'm excited. Hopefully you guys are as well. Thought we'd change it up a little bit today. I know try to rotate through what our topics are each week. So today it's focusing on nutrition. And one of the things that a lot of people, this time of year, as we're focusing on the beginning of the year, people sort of refocus on their health, which is an important thing. And so people trying, different exercise routines, they're trying different diets, they're trying all sorts of stuff. And there's so much information out there that it can be hard to figure out, what it is that you're supposed to be doing that actually works. And the big secret with it all is it really depends on your lifestyle, your body type, all these different things. What is it you're trying to accomplish? Are you trying to lose weight, trying to build muscle, just be healthy in general? And so there's many different things. So today we're going to be focusing on something that I think is important to talk about because a lot of people try this, and it's intermittent fasting. And the whole idea is that with intermittent fasting is that it's an eating pattern that cycles between periods of fasting or not eating and then obviously eating. And it doesn't really specify the specific types of food that you eat during your eating periods, but just rather when you should be eating. And there's a lot of science that's coming to light that backs several different concepts here. One, obviously, you are what you eat. So, Big Mac versus vegetables, difference there. But also there's the scientific evidence that shows that when you eat and what you eat when is becoming more of an important thing. And so a lot of people don't realize this. And that's where, everybody's body is different. So figuring out what works for your body is the key thing. And this is where some people try fasting because they find that by structuring their day and their meals in a certain way, then that way they are able to, be what's doing best for their body. Um, so when we're talking about this, it's not really a diet in the traditional sense of the word because we're not really necessarily eliminating foods. That's not the point of intermittent fasting. You can, but that's not the ultimate goal here. So it's more of a eating pattern as far as what you're doing is when you're consuming food. And this is not something new. This is something that humans have done for centuries, essentially. It actually probably days with the availability of food pretty much anywhere and everywhere, we don't think of it in those terms. So that's where it's so important to understand as far as, it's fasting from time to time is actually more normal than it is eating 3 to 4 meals a day. I mean, that's, an interesting concept, right? We're just so used to eating at least 3 times a day, sometimes even more than that, that we don't think of the fact that really our bodies are used to the concept of actually going for extended periods of time without food. And obviously nowadays, certain religious or spiritual religion people fast for those type of reasons as well, and that's why it's not that far off from your normal concept of fasting. It's actually not a bad thing necessarily, and so the science is showing that your body actually does well when we go through periods of fasting. For instance, when and, this is on the cellular and molecular level, so we're about to get a little bit nerdy here. So for you folks who aren't into that, sorry, but I want to explain it for those who are. The human growth hormone, or HGH, levels increase as much as five-fold um, when you go through periods of fasting. And this has benefits, obviously, for fat loss and muscle gain. So this is really important. Your insulin sensitivity improves, and the levels of insulin drop dramatically when you're fasting, which makes its stored body fat more accessible because this is your body, having to use what it's already got for energy stores rather than what you're consuming. Um, and the cellular repair process, it gets initiated, which means that includes autophagy, which is where the cells digest and remove old and dysfunctional proteins that build up inside the cells. This happens during a state of fasting. So that's why it's important because your body's basically cleaning itself, and this is key to keeping it healthy. And then gene expression is the other big one, is that where changes in the functions of your genes related to longevity and protection against disease is actually increase during periods of fasting. And this is a big one here that a lot of people don't realize, is that your metabolic rate when you fast can increase anywhere between 3.6 to 14% because your body's using what it's already got on board. And so it's having to, increase your activity internally, which drives your metabolic rate up because it's using everything that's there. So, obviously, there's numerous reasons why people do this. We touched upon the idea of religious and spiritual reasons. Other big reason, that's why it's popular nowadays, is the whole idea of weight loss. Because of all of the cellular processes that I just described, that's what happens and helps us during this intermittent fasting period. So that's why a lot of people do that. Obviously, it reduces insulin resistance. So for those who are at risk for diabetes, obviously always check with your doctor because if you have health conditions in general, but also just period, before you start any new type of eating pattern, diet, fitness routine, you always should check with your doctor because they can help guide you with certain things based off your medical history. That obviously, since I don't know that about you, I can't give specific guidance. Um, but so definitely talk with your doctor, but intermittent fasting will decrease your insulin resistance, which is good because it reduces your risk for diabetes. It decreases markers of inflammation, which is a key driver of many chronic diseases. So this is really important. It reduces your LDL cholesterol, which is the bad cholesterol, so that's great. And it also reduces blood triglycerides, which is another type of fat that's in your bloodstream that's not good as well. It might be able to help prevent cancer. Further studies are needed on this, but there's promising results so far. It aids in the growth of new nerve cells. I mean, that's important because this is going to help protect against certain diseases like Alzheimer's that they're thinking because it's helping generate new nerve cells within your brain. That's a really good thing because Alzheimer's actually, as the disease progresses, causes those connections and nerve cells to actually deteriorate and waste away. So this is really important. It might have anti-aging benefits above and beyond that right there. And so that is so important. And as I mentioned before, for the last three items I just discussed, those need a lot more research, but the early initial studies are very, very promising. And so this is something definitely to keep in tune for the future because, the intermittent fasting, I think, is not going anywhere and it could be really, really beneficial. Key thing here is there's many different ways to do intermittent fasting. And this is where a lot of people get confused. And that's completely understandable because it's like, well, how do I do this? If it's so great, how do I do it, right? Um, and all of them either involve splitting a single day or a week into periods of eating and fasting. And I'm going to go into them here. And it's key to keep in mind fasting doesn't necessarily mean nothing at all. It can mean nothing at all, but it also can mean very little amount of food. And there's several main types. There's the 16-8 diet, the 5-2, the 14-10, and the eat, stop, eat, alternate day, and the warrior diet version. And I say diet, remember, loosely here. It's not really, I should be saying eating pattern. The most common one, though, is the 16-8. And this is because it's probably the easiest to follow. And so what this means that you fast essentially for 16 hours and only eat during an 8-hour window. For most people, this means, I mean, when you think about when we sleep at night, depending on how long you sleep, but basically from the time you finish eating in the evening time until the time you eat breakfast in the morning, your body's going through a natural state of fasting. And when you think of all the different processes that happen when you're asleep, cellular repair, all these different things, that your body needs, vital things in order for it to function, this all happens in a fasting state, right? And so this is why when you actually are eating during the day, it's important to fuel your body with healthy, nutritious stuff because it needs that in order to be able to help it repair and do other things when you're asleep. So when you're thinking of, that period of time overnight when you're sleeping, your body's in a natural fasting state. And depending on, the length of that time, it can be somewhere between 10 to 12 hours. So for instance, if you stop eating somewhere around no later than 7:30 at night, and then you go, you're probably going to be still awake for a while, but you're not eating. You go to bed, you wake up. If you get up and you don't eat, if you have to get up early in like 5 o'clock and you're going to get ready to go to work or something, if you work out before work and then you eat, then, I mean, at least at that point, you've been in a fasted state for at least 10 hours. If you don't eat breakfast until 7 o'clock, now you've been in a fasted state for 12 hours. So the concept of the 16-8 method is that you're fasting for 16 hours. So it's not that much longer than what your body typically experiences every single night. And this is, where for most people, what they do to accommodate this is they just skip breakfast. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. I want to expand upon the concept, though, the way our society functions now with food readily available, with the artificial light and all that. Many people don't stop eating until way later in the nighttime, and they'll eat right up till they go to bed or they don't eat dinner till later. And this is where it gets challenging because our body does need that fasting period overnight to do important things. And this is why we're seeing all these increases in weight, increases in insulin resistance, increases in other metabolic conditions, is because we're not allowing our body the time that it needs to process everything and to repair things. So getting back to the 16-8 method here, when we're fasting for that period of time, and when you skip breakfast, a lot of people are like, well, everybody says breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Well, true, you need to give your body fuel. The whole concept with intermittent fasting is you're giving your body the right fuel it needs just in a shorter window. So this is why it's so important to make sure what you're consuming is healthy. Because if you're consuming it in a less period of time, then what you're putting in needs to be really healthy. I mean, obviously, it needs to be healthy in general anyway, but especially if you're not eating over a whole period of time. So with the 16-8 method, you're actually following this method every day of the week. So and I actually have some graphics that I want to show you guys so that way you can see what I'm talking about here. So this is the 16-8 diet. And as you can see that you go to sleep and then you fast until you basically have lunch, which would be your first meal. And then your last meal is by 8 p.m. And as I mentioned before, that with the concept of intermittent fasting, you're not focusing on counting calories, you're not focusing on specifically what you're eating. And it's all compressing everything that you're consuming for your day is within a specific time frame. So in addition to that, that's where you also have to focus on, how many calories are you consuming? Obviously, what type of exercise are you doing? And factor all this in to when you're consuming your food. And so this is why it's important to understand calories, understand, obviously nutrients, where are they coming from, and then structure that within your intermittent fasting within that eating window. So that's why even though fasting overall doesn't, impact as far as that goes, I mean, if you're fast for 16 hours, but in your 8-hour window that you're eating donuts, you're eating cake, you're eating, chips, unhealthy items, you're probably not going to get the results you want because of what you're consuming, in addition to the amount of calories you're consuming. Versus, you're having healthy, lean proteins, you're having vegetables, you're having fruit, those type of things. And, that's to say, even if you're going off a 2,000 calorie diet, where your calories coming from is just as important as when you're eating your calories. So, to keep that in mind with all of these is because that's the key thing here. Um, so the next method we're talking about is the 5-2 method. And this involves eating normally 5 days of the week and then restricting calories the other 2 days. On the restricted days, typically the recommended is that men consume only 600 calories and women take in 500 calories. So for an example of this, let me pull up a nice little graphic here. So as you can see, day 1 you would eat normally. Day 2 would be the fasting day. Day 3 and 4 would be normal days. Day 5 would be a fasting day, and then day 6 and 7 would be normal days. And so obviously with this method, you can see that, you're still allowed to have your normal amount of meals most of the days of the week. And once again, here you still have to make sure, you're factoring in calories, physical activity, all of that into the amount of food you're taking in, not just when you're taking it in. So that's where, key concept is this allows a little bit more flexibility because you're still allowed essentially to have, if you're doing 3 meals a day, or if you're doing 6 meals that are just smaller throughout the day, you can do that most days of the week. And then that's not to say that you can't have that same structure the days you're fasting. It just means the volume of calories you're taking in during the fasting days is significantly less than what you're taking in on the days that you're not fasting. And then, so the key thing here is with anything, it's not going overboard on the days that you're not fasting or the times you're not fasting, and that's regardless of if you're whatever method you're following. You can't expect positive results if on the time that you're eating, you can cram in all these calories. So, you're not going to offset it by fasting. So moving on to the next one. This is the 14-10 method. And this one's very similar to the 16-8 method. This involves fasting for 14 hours, though, and eating during a 10-hour window. So you've got more time to eat, less time fasting. So let me pull this here. Once again, most people skip breakfast. And as you can see, it's just structuring it a little bit different. Rather than having their first meal at noon for like lunchtime, you can start eating like around 10. And so once again, obviously, as we were talking about, the key is focusing on consuming healthy foods during the time you're fasting. I'm going to put up the 16-8 right here. So as you can see, let me back it up. There we go. As you can see, they're very, 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 very similar. It's just really structuring on the time as far as when you are, consuming your food. So the next method we're going to talk about is the eat, stop, eat method. And this is similar to the 5-2 method. So this involves eating normally for 5 days of the week and then fasting the other 2 days. And so unlike the 5-2 method where you're consuming a restricted amount of calories on the fasting days, on the eat, stop, eat method, you're not consuming anything as on the days that you're not eating. And so this is 24 hours without eating. So I'm going to hold that up there. So as you can see, it's very similar in concept to the 5-2 method, but the idea is that rather than having restricted calories, you're going to be able to not eat anything on the eat, stop, eat method. So for a lot of people, this can be incredibly hard because one of the things that I know, if you think about it this way, when we're hungry, right, your stomach rumbling is eventually you get hunger pains, and it's like that's really, really uncomfortable. And a lot of people don't like that feeling, and obviously, hence why we've evolved. When we were hunter-gatherers, we wanted food, so we would go out and we try to find food, and then when you'd find it, you'd eat it. But for them, they didn't have an option. for us, we've got food readily available, which makes it sometimes incredibly challenging to follow these methods because you're having to deal with those hunger pains. And we'll talk about that here a little bit more in a minute, but just wanted to give you an idea. It can be a challenge to follow these diets. So the next type of diet we're going to follow or talk about here is the alternate day method. And this involves eating normally every other day and fasting or restricted calories on the opposite days. So this would follow more along the lines of the eat, stop, eat method or the 5-2 method. So here, so this here, as you can see, is you'd eat normally, and then the next day you're going to either fast completely or eat only a few hundred calories. And then you would repeat that process, so it's every other day. And while this is great, it's important to understand that, as I said before, it's following the method where you're eating one day normal, then the next day you're not eating at all or eating only a little bit. So as you can see, there's sort of two main concepts here when it comes to intermittent fasting. You have where you are fasting throughout the day, and every day, or you are fasting one day and not fasting the next. And so before we go into a little bit further on that, I'm going to go over one more type of method, and that's the warrior diet method. And this is similar to the 16-8 or the 14-10. And this involves fasting for 20 hours. And you're only eating during a 4-hour window. Once again, most people skip breakfast on this one. But if they're hungry during the day, before they're allowed to eat, essentially, you can have small amounts of fruits or vegetables. And for your primary meal, once again, it's not any specific recommendations. It's just the idea that you should be getting healthy foods. Even though the diet doesn't recommend that, or the eating pattern doesn't recommend that, that would be my recommendation. Is obviously you still need to fuel your body with healthy stuff, regardless of when you're eating. And with the warrior diet method, it's done every day of the week. So as you can see, there's 3 examples for each type. And this is where you're going to be fasting every day, for a period of time, then you're allowed to eat for a period of time. Or you eat normal one day and fast the next day. And so how you structure it is up to you in that regard. It just is incredibly challenging to figure it out at first, especially when you're dealing, as I mentioned, with the hunger pains and all of that. And something I do want to touch upon is something called spontaneous meal skipping. And this is a non-structured intermittent fasting concept. And you do this when you don't feel hungry, you're too busy to cook or eat, or like if you're traveling and you can't find anything you want to eat. So this, when you think about it this way, is we sort of do some form of fasting when we're, busy. Think of if you're at work someday, you've had breakfast, you go to work, all of a sudden, you've got tons of things going on, and next thing you know, it's past lunchtime, you haven't had time to eat, you don't even have time to go get a snack because you still got things you need to get done, and then the next time you're eating is dinner. So you've gone through this whole period of where you've actually fasted, right? And most likely it's a good 10, 12 hours. So that's, concept of intermittent fasting as well. And so this is where you're wanting to make sure when you're eating, obviously, whatever that is, it's healthy, balanced meals. So that way, your body has what it needs as far as nutrition. And this is key here because some people's bodies can't handle the concept of intermittent fasting and enter starvation mode. So that way, when they do eat, their body wants to conserve everything that they take in and then store it because of the fact they don't know the next time, your body doesn't know the next time it's going to eat. And so this is something that is, it's important to realize. And some people need to eat every few hours in order to see good results. So this is why figuring out what works best for you is so important. But definitely talk to your doctor before you start any type of program, and then figure out which one you want to try first. Do you want to eat one day that's normal and then not eat at all the next day, or do you want to try not eating for, extended period of time, essentially, and then eat in a smaller window. Uh, so to me, at least what I've found is the second method I just described, whether it's the 16-8, the 14-10, or the warrior diet type, where you're doing it consistently every day. That seems to be a little bit easier because at least I know I'm getting to eat every day. Um, and then there's some frequently asked questions that people have, and so I want to touch upon those before we conclude today's session. One is, can I drink liquids during the fasting period? And this is yes. The key thing here is what you're drinking. Water, coffee, tea, and other non-caloric beverages are fine. Key thing here is if you're a coffee or tea drinker, don't add sugar or anything to your coffee, or tea, because obviously that adds calories. And it's important to note that if you're drinking caffeinated versions, caffeine actually is an appetite suppressant. So this might help get rid of some of those hunger pains. So if you can tolerate black tea or black coffee and you're hungry, I would recommend that. I know for me, I'm a tea drinker, so I like tea and can usually, and I like my tea black and strong. I brew it for as long as possible without burning it. And so the concept is, isn't it unhealthy to skip breakfast? And this is what I touched upon a little bit earlier. It's not a problem to skip breakfast. The problem is that most people who do skip breakfast also have unhealthy lifestyles in other ways. It's not just that they're skipping breakfast, it's that what they're doing in the rest of their whole life that makes up, unhealthy habits just in general. So this is where if you're making sure you're consuming the right nutrients and healthy foods the rest of the time, skipping breakfast is really not that bad. Okay. And can you take supplements while fasting? And yes, it's just important to realize that certain supplements, like fat-soluble vitamins, actually work better when they're taken with meals. So if you're going to take supplements, it's important to research them so that way you know this, and then also make sure that if they do work better when taken with food, just take it at the appropriate time. And can you work out while fasted? This is a big one, right? Because obviously part of getting into better health is having, some form of physical activity. And yes, you can work out while you're fasting. In fact, you're actually probably going to see more weight loss because your body's having to use your fat stores. Some people, depending on your fitness goals, recommend taking branched chain amino acid or BCAAs beforehand, but if you're not going to be like doing a marathon or anything super, super, super intense, most likely you're not going to need this, but it's up to you if you would like to do that. And then another big question that a lot of people have is, doesn't fasting cause muscle loss? Keep in mind, all types of weight loss methods of any kind can result in some muscle loss. This is why it's so important to make sure you're doing strength training exercises, because this is going to help combat the muscle loss. And that way, when you're actually taking in food, you need to actually be consuming lots of protein. This isn't going to mean go overboard to where you end up having obviously kidney damage from taking in too much protein, but this means that by actually taking in extra protein, that's healthy protein, and doing strength training exercises while doing intermittent fasting, science is showing that it actually causes less muscle loss than regular calorie restriction. So think of it this way. So if, depending on, average body type, the recommended amount of calories per day is 2,000 calories a day. So if you're taking in 2,000 calories, but you're structuring those calories to be nutritious, high in protein, and you're putting them all in the same window, then you're actually more likely to lose weight and not muscle than you are if you're just restricting calories and doing everything else. And so this is obviously why it's important to do this, slowly start making changes. But that if that's your ultimate goal, A, you want to lose weight, but you don't want to lose muscle, which obviously that's a big thing because you don't, the whole point is to have a body that's healthy and able to do what you want it to do. This might be the way to go for that. Then the other big question is, will fasting slow down my metabolism? And This is where studies are finding that short-term fasts actually boost your metabolism. And when we're talking short-term, this is what we've described in all the 6 different methods we covered today. Longer fasts are fasting where you don't eat for 3 or more days. Those is when you're going to see your suppression in your metabolism. And for the most part, there's never going to be a method if the whole goal is to get into better health, is that's going to tell you to fast for 3 or more days. Um, Typically, you're going to see that more maybe along the lines with the religious or spiritual reasons for fasting. But if you're doing this to improve your health, it's not going to be anything more than the most likely 24-hour period without fasting. If anyone recommends more than that, then I would not recommend following that method. And there's some key things to note here. There's certain groups who should not be doing an intermittent fasting type of method of dieting at all, ever. Um, and that would be kids or teens who are under the age of 18. Their bodies are growing, and so for them to go, they need nutrients at regular intervals that are healthy without any periods of fasting. Um, Women who are pregnant or breastfeeding, obviously, you've got new life growing in you, and you need nutrients, and you shouldn't be following an intermittent fasting pattern. Anyone who has diabetes or blood sugar problems. And obviously, I know we talked about how intermittent fasting is to help reduce insulin resistance. And while that is key, you definitely need to check with your doctor before following any of this, because obviously, with diabetes or blood sugar issues, your blood sugars can vary and fluctuate throughout the day significantly, especially if in relation to your diet when you're consuming food and all that. And obviously, if you have a history of any type of eating disorder, intermittent fasting is not a good option for you because it can trigger things to come back up and then send you back into the same patterns that you had before. So, definitely, if you're considering intermittent fasting, talk to your primary care practitioner before you start the process. Um, if you do go down this path, keep in mind, find something that's going to fit into your lifestyle. To me, that's where, fasting for a period of time each day, and then still eating each day, and obviously by structuring it in a way that way I can, still enjoy meals with my family, still feel part of that it's not as disruptive as if I was trying to follow one of the methods where I don't eat completely for 24 hours. And so I think that's something that's so important. But definitely don't rule out intermittent fasting. It's something that is, they're finding more and more positive things are coming from it. So that's why I wanted to touch upon it today. Hopefully you guys found this video to be informative. If you have questions, please either message me, put a comment below. I'd love to hear from you guys. So just let me know what you think. Otherwise, you guys have a great weekend, and I will see you next week, probably in February. So have a good rest of January, and I will see you then, and you guys stay healthy.